lift all our voices together. And we are going to ask you if you are able to stand with us to bring the spirit that we had in that street, out on Wall Street, into this space with us tonight. And we know that we're here because we ain't going to let nobody turn us around. Is that right? Let me hear that. We ain't going to let nobody turn us around. And so we're going to start off with that song tonight. And I need you to sing it nice and loud with me. We ain't gonna let nobody, we ain't gonna let injustice, we ain't gonna let racism, we ain't gonna let no mayor that's been trying to kick our people off the streets turn us around. All right, y'all, I need it nice and loud. We got the energy in here. We gotta bring it tonight. Here we go. No, now let nobody turn us around. Turn me around. Turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let injustice turn me around. No, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let injustice turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let no mayor, no, turn me around, oh, turn me around. Ain't gonna let no mayor, turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let no poverty turn me around. Turn me around. Turn me around. Turn me around. Ain't gonna let no poverty turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Turn me around. Turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Turn me around. Turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, keep on walking, keep on talking, keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Freedom, freedom, freedom land.
Now, there's no party like a party with the Poor People's Campaign. So I need you to do me a favor. Right where you are, just move your shoulders a little bit. Move your shoulders a little bit. Yeah. Oh, come on, come on. I said I move for justice, 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 justice. Oh, I said this a little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. This a little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. This a little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Let it shine. Oh, 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 oh yeah.
Let it shine. We are out here. No. We're not getting quiet, actually. I need you to get all back up. We're not ready. We gotta be ready. We gotta be ready for the long haul, y'all. And I need everyone all the way to the back if you can stand up with us. I know we just had a march. You're gonna have a chance to sit down and take a listen to the stories that are brought to this space today. But right now, I need that energy with me. So stand up if you can, please. Because we shall not be moved. We shall not be moved. I'm saying that nice and loud for our family that is in the streets right now, that has been illegally removed. Because everybody has a right to live, and we have to take care of our family in this movement. And so we are singing this nice and loud so that everyone out there can hear that we shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. Let me hear you say that. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We want to lift up the Spanish language here. Adalis is going to lead us, and it's going to be a no-nose move it on. I want all you to join us.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
We shall not be moved.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. Hello, everybody. Testing, testing. Hello, everybody. Come on, turn this mic up some. Turn it up. Turn this mic up. Can y'all hear me in the back? Say forward together. Forward together. Bring it up some more. Bring it up some more. Listen, tonight is a massive, one of our 12 gatherings around the country as we're mobilizing for the mass, you can take some of the echo out, mass poor people's, low-wage workers assembly and moral march on Washington and to the polls. And everything we do tonight is about letting people know this gathering is representative of 5 states. And everybody, you just have to follow me, Mike, man, I'm an old Southern preacher. Everybody that has a sign that has anything on it about June 18th, hold it up. Turn it this way so the media all can see them. Hold them up. And if they don't have one, y'all pass them out. Before the end of the night, I want everybody, Clinton and all of our other folk, to have a sign that has June 18th on it. June 18th, you got a card, hold that up. You've got a, there you go, hold them up. Somebody say, mass, poor peoples, low-wage worker, assembly, and moral march on Washington and to the polls. The time is now. You know, we've got to do this, you all, because our politics are trapped in the lies of scarcity. The lies of scarcity. And the lies of scarcity keep alive the lies of trickle-down economics and the lies of neoliberalism, which leave people out. False forms of Christian nationalism and racism and militarism and climate devastation, you got a mess. These kind of politics turn us against each other. Blame the poor for their poverty, even though we live in the midst of abundance. And we know that poverty is not so much a personal choice as a political consequence of policies. We have the resources to meet the needs of everybody. The only thing we don't have enough of is moral consciousness and the will to do what's right. And that's our job, to shift the moral narrative of this nation. I'm going to come back later and try to bring some synergy. But as we begin tonight, and we're live streaming, and there are tens of thousands of people online, wave at them, y'all. I want to ask Brother Clinton to come and talk about how we're doing interpretation and pledge cards and social media. And then I want to ask, and I want y'all to give him a big hand, the Reverend Philip Jackson when he comes. He's the pastor rector of this place. Allows us to walk on Wall Street and have this mass meeting right near Wall Street.
And then once he comes, the New York State Tri-Chairs are going to come and tell why they're mobilizing for June 18th. And then we're going to show a special video that the nation needs to see. And then we're going to put a face. After the litany by our clergy, we have testifiers that will be coming. Because the most important moral voices in the country today are those that have to fight day in and day out against the evils of racism and poverty and ecological devastation and denial of health care and the war economy and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism. America better hear them, because hearing them is the only hope, really, for the fulfillment of this democracy's promises that it wrote on paper. Brother Clinton.
All right, y'all, just a few announcements and then we'll get started. The first announcement is that we do have ASL interpretation for our deaf and hard of hearing neighbors and siblings in this movement. We have seating reserved for you in the front right next to the interpreter. Let's give a round of applause for our ASL interpreter, please.
And good evening, everyone. I'm here doing Spanish interpretation with my colleague Alba, who's down there too. I'm going to make an announcement in Spanish. Buenas tardes, mi gente, ¿cómo están? Estamos interpretando al español toda la sesión de hoy, así que quien necesite un equipo de interpretación para podernos escuchar, por favor, levanten la mano. ¿Hay alguien que necesite? Si se pueden identificar. Y aquí está mi compañera Alba, que tiene el equipo, así que por favor pasen a recoger, o si tienen dificultades de movilidad, por favor háganos una seña y se lo llevamos. Gracias.
Thank you both. All righty, if you got one of those pledge cards that says June 18th on it, hold it up in the air so we can see it. Everybody say June 18th. Washington, D.C. June 18th. Washington, D.C. The whole point of tonight is that we are mobilizing towards the mass poor people's and low-wage workers' assembly and moral march on Washington and to the polls. You are here tonight not for a show, not to just have fun, not to sit in a pew and do nothing. You are here to get committed to this movement, to make commitments and sign up to take yourself, your neighbors, your friends, your colleagues, the people in your neighborhood to where? When? That's right. So tonight, you're going to fill out that pledge card. We'll have pens a little later in the program, and you're going to get committed. Make yourself known that you are coming, that you're filling a bus, and that your whole community is going there. Let's give ourselves a round of applause for getting organized, y'all. And then one more announcement. As you can see over on the screen, there are some hashtags for tonight. We have hashtag Poor People's Campaign, hashtag Meet Us in DC, hashtag Moral Assembly. It is our jobs inside of this church tonight to make sure that we tell the world what we're doing, where we're going, to tell the stories that these amazing, amazing people are sharing with us tonight about why they're mobilizing and how these systems of injustice are impacting them. We are breaking normal church protocols. You can have your phone out. You can tweet. You can post on Instagram and Facebook all night, the entire time. Give me a thumbs up if you're going to do that for us. That's right. I don't see everybody's thumb. Let's get those thumbs up in the air. We're all going to post on social media, right? Say hashtag Poor People's Campaign. Hashtag Meet Us in DC. Hashtag Moral Assembly. Where are we going on June 18th? All right, y'all, thank you.
All right, we want to make sure that the podium mic is on. All of our folk that are working with sound. And let us always, when these pastors open up these congregations for justice movements, let us be thankful for them doing that. And let us thank right now this church and Pastor Jackson as he comes to tell us why even Trinity, this church and him, are mobilizing for June 18th. Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you, Reverend Barber. Thank you so much, and thank you all for coming here today to Trinity Church. You're going to use those phones, aren't you? You know, we're still Episcopalians. We struggle with that, but you know what, for this, you go ahead. You go on ahead. You use them, you tweet them, you send it, you register, you register, you register. June what? 18th. June 18th. Now see, the word that caught me so strongly in the goals is register. See, I'm a native Chicagoan. That's right. And Chicago, we vote. We vote what? Early and, yeah, that's right. Then I came to New York, which is one of the unvotingest cities in the country. Did you know that? New York is one of the unvotingest cities in the country. Well, we got to up that because we've got a job to do on behalf of all people in this country. Now, I'm tempted to get preachy, but Reverend's going to get mad at me. So I'm not. But I'm going to leave you with a little scripture, just a little scripture. You may have heard this one. Jesus is talking with a man. And the man says to him, what's the greatest commandment?
That's right.
Jesus says the greatest commandment, he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your strength, with all your soul, with all your mind. And then he adds something on. Because the young man says, well, I've done all that all my life. Jesus says, and love who?
Neighbor.
Your neighbor as yourself. As yourself. And the man says, well, who is my neighbor? And Jesus says, there was a Samaritan who was going down to Jericho from Jerusalem. You know the rest of the story, don't you? Because the neighbor is who? The other. Everyone. The man in need. The man who was hurt. The man who was down. The man who was beaten. The man who was injured. The man who needed help. Let us all never forget who our neighbor is. Our neighbor is he and she who need help. And in our country today, if you haven't noticed, we've got a lot of people that need help. So I thank you for coming to Trinity Church today. I thank you for being part of this movement. I thank you for the largeness of your hearts. I thank you for the generosity of your spirit. And I thank you for the way you care about our country, its people, and our land. On behalf of Trinity Church, welcome, and God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you. Give it up. We want to ask now, keep this mic up for me, the tri-chairs from the New York State Poor People's Campaign Coordinating Committee. Come on, give it up for them. Testing.
Well, that's worth it all right there. Thank you so much. My name's Kelly Smith, and I could not be more proud or humbled to be part of this team, to be one of the tri-chairs of the New York State Poor People's Campaign. I was called to this work about 4 years ago. I was sick and tired of seeing the same struggles face my family, my community, my city, my state, my nation. I'm sick and tired of seeing people go without health care, with paying too much for health care that does nothing to cover us. I'm sick and tired of living in a city and a state that finds money for sports stadiums, can't find money for housing, can't find money for health care. When we sit in this beautiful church is violently evicting homeless camps around this city. I worry for my son. I worry that he'll be able to find a living wage. I worry that he lives in a world where his black skin is valued less than my white skin. And I could sit here and we could be sick and tired and frustrated, and I could worry and worry and worry and wring my hands. Or I could stand up, I could speak up, and I could fight. Reverend Barbara, I often think of what you say. It has meant so much to me when you say if you knew this was your last breath, what would you do? How many of us have thought about that during this pandemic? If we thought this was our last breath, what would we do? Well, we are going to stand up, we are going to speak out, and we are going to fight, and we are going to mobilize for June 18th in Washington, D.C.
Good evening. I'm Reverend West McNeil. I'm part of the Poor People's Campaign because early on in my life, I felt a call to give my life to serving God. And based on what I read in the Bible and on the example of Jesus, I know that to be part of God's work in this world means taking the side of the poor and dispossessed and marginalized, and to join in the struggle against the forces of empire and domination. I'm part of this campaign because I'm angry. I'm angry that last week, our governor and our legislature, like Kelly said, decided to give $600 million of our money to the Buffalo Bills, and at the same time said that we can't afford to give health care to everybody. We can't afford to pay home health care workers a living wage. We can't afford to fund our public education. I'm also part of this movement because this campaign gives me hope. Because I know that the only way we're going to win the transformative change that we need and deserve is if we come together across race and region, across gender, across our organizations and issues, and if we orient ourselves around the needs and demands of the 140 million poor and low-income people in this country and the billions more around the world. And so that's why I'm organizing and mobilizing for the Mass Poor People's Assembly and Moral March on Washington and to the polls on June 18th, and I hope that you will join me.
Assalamu alaikum.
We're keeping the movement safe tonight.
Bismillah. My name is Jamel Quay Hudson. I'm an artist and one of the tri-chairs of the New York State Poor People's Campaign. Members of this beloved community, we've gathered here today on this Moral Monday in New York City to tell the truth. In the heart of the financial capital of the world, people from various faith traditions and organizations have converged on Wall Street to demonstrate how a fusion movement works together to demand this country addresses the issue of poverty and provides true liberty and justice for all of God's children. I bear witness that the God of Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is one, and that God is just. And my faith, my iman, is what calls me into this movement to struggle for freedom and liberation. And the injustice that's being committed by the powerful, the arrogance and haughtiness by the most wealthy in this nation, the mistreatment of the poor is being recorded in a book. And I believe that God is going to judge each of us according to what we've done on this earth. And it's our job as believers, people submitted to God's will and followers of prophetic models of communication, to warn, to admonish, and to say to the leaders, as the prophets before us said, to Pharaoh, to Caesar, to the Quraysh, woe, stop oppressing the poor. Stop your idol worship. Turn from your wicked ways. Allah is the most forgiving, the most merciful. From Brooklyn to Queens, from Queens to Manhattan, from Manhattan to the Bronx, from the Bronx to Staten Island, from Staten Island to Buffalo, from Buffalo to Plattsburgh, to Albany, to Binghamton, from Binghamton to Hudson Valley, to Rochester. Poor people are rising up across the state of New York. The New York State Poor People's Campaign is mobilizing, organizing, registering, educating, and engaging and energizing a mass poor people's low-wage workers assembly to descend on Washington on June 18th as we make our voice heard that we are more than a moment. We are a movement, and inshallah, you'll see New York on June 18th. Forward together! Assalamu alaikum.
Yes, that's the man. Yes. It is so important that we articulate. We're not begging, because we're human beings. We're not just saying give folk a handout. We're saying loose these systems that keep people needing things in the first place. We're not doing this because we just want to do right by poor people. No, poor and low-wealth people are leading with us, and religious leaders and advocates. Everybody in, nobody out. This is not a day, it's a declaration. Say a declaration. June 18th is just a continuation, not an end. We will embolden and intensify our agitation nonviolently with love and truth until justice comes for all people. You got the professional staff, Congress is mobilizing. You've got United University Professions, Islamic Center of North America Council, the Brooklyn for Peace, the Move the Midway Money Coalition, Code Pink is organized, Campaign for New York Health, SEIU 1199, Citizens Action, Sisters of Mercy, Focus Breakfast Food Pantry, Episcopal Diocese of New York Chapter of National Association of Social Workers, Southern Tier Interfaith Coalition, and many, many others. But most importantly, we have real people. People who every day mobilize their lives to deal with the meanness of the systems. I want you to take a look at the video. This video says it's time for the rejected to lead a justice revival.
Put our hands together. Let America hear us. 'Cause we ain't going nowhere. Come on, everybody. Come on, Texas. Put our hands together. Let America hear us. 'Cause we ain't going nowhere. Come on, everybody. Give it up for the Texas singers. I woke up this morning with my mind.
This is not about left versus right. Saving this democracy's possibility is non-negotiable. This is about right versus wrong. And the right time to do right is right now.
140 million people in this nation are poor or one emergency away from economic ruin. But it does not have to be this way.
And you look at the diversity in this crowd. This is the America they are afraid of.
In the 1960s, Democrats and Republicans stood up together for social justice. It was the right thing then, and it's the right thing now.
We noticed Linda Bay's
The goal of the Poor People's Campaign was to help the poor confront the evils that create poverty.
But my father used to tell me, don't piss down my back and tell me it's raining.
The government should listen to our voices, no matter our race, citizenship, or how much money we have.
We are not lazy. We are exhausted from the endless cycle of poverty.
We are demanding what is morally fair and just.
You need to stop suppressing and regressing and start addressing and resurrecting.
So stop messing with our right to vote.
We need to make it easier to access the ballot. We need to make it easier to live with dignity and respect without struggling. We didn't take shortcuts when we marched, and we don't deserve to be shorted in this legislation.
That's right.
My body is tired. My voice is shaky, but my mind is determined.
I have done nothing but fight.
We know that for democracy to work for us, it has to work for all of us. It has to include all of us. So show me
what democracy looks like.
The persistence, the strength, and the courage of this movement is what it's about.
For the sake of bringing change to all our communities.
I want the people to win. Take this opportunity in my hand. Change does not come from the top down. It comes from the bottom up.
And we recognize as people of faith, this is the work of the church, but it is not only the work of the church. We got a word for the U.S. Senate. Come back to Jesus.
Oh.
When we show up and show out, we walk our talk.
Together, we are strong. We can protect each other.
Insurrections never win. Only resurrections win.
And history tells us what we have to do when states work to subvert democracy. We're not going to let them stop us from coming out, and this is our country, and I'm what an American looks like.
The biggest gun we got is called a ballot box.
We must rise up as a moral army.
They're creating an America where everyone counts.
We must challenge every weak Democrat, every sorry Republican, every silent independent, that you will not stand in the way of our right to vote. Ain't gonna let nobody turn you around.
It's time for the rejected to lead a revival of justice in America.
We gather to declare that we need a moral revival, a radical revolution of values. And we call on the prophets of old from sacred texts from the world's religions who proclaimed,
the believers, both men and women, are in charge of and responsible for one another. They all enjoin the doing of what is right and forbid the doing of what is wrong.
All the workers you have exploited and cheated cried out for judgment. The groans of the workers you use and abuse are a roar in the ears of God. James 5, verse 4.
the wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita teaches, Arjuna, whenever righteousness is on the decline, unrighteousness is in the ascendant, then I am reincarnated. For the protection of the virtuous, for the extirpation of the evildoers, and for the establishing of Dharma, righteousness, on a firm footing, I am born from age to age.
This is what the Lord says. Do what is just and right. Rescue from the hand of the oppressor, the one who has been robbed. Do no wrong or violence to the immigrant, the children, or the widow, and do not shed innocent blood. Jeremiah 22:3.
55 years ago, Reverend Dr. King said, "There comes a time when silence is betrayal. The truth must be told."
And the truth is that nearly half the United States is poor or low income, and that more than 250,000 people die each year from poverty, the lack of education, and the lack of health care. The truth is that the pandemics of COVID-19, systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation, and war hurt the poor first and worst.
We must break the silence of systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation, and the denial of health care, militarism, and the war economy in our society. We must shift the false moral narrative of religious nationalism.
We commit to following the footsteps of the prophet Isaiah. If you remove the yoke of oppression, the pointing of the finger, the speaking of evil, if you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, you shall raise up the foundation of many generations. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorers of street to live in. Isaiah 58.
It's time for a moral movement that can revive our democracy and fully address poverty and low wages from the bottom up. It's time to assemble and march on June 18th at the Mass Poor People and Low Wage Workers Assembly and Moral March on Washington and to the polls. It's time, like our sacred texts teach, to lift from the bottom so everyone may rise.
Somebody shout, lift from the bottom. So everybody rises. Now, these gatherings, as we broadcast across the world, it is important, and the same thing is going to happen on June 18th. We're not going there so people can speak on behalf of folk. We're going there to build a stage for people to speak on their own behalf. And we know that folks' stories are much longer than 2 minutes. We do this because we're trying to maintain a time frame so people won't leave the live stream, because it's important that everybody gets it. But we've got some powerful, we call them testifiers. Now, they're not going to come in the tradition of testifying in church where you tell how good things are. They've got to testify to how bad things are. Because if we don't break the heart of this nation, we don't have a chance. Zora Neale Hurston said, if you smile while people are hurting you, they will kill you and say you enjoyed it. It's not easy for these testifiers to come and put themselves out, but they said they wanted to. We've asked them not to say, you know, I'm catching hell, but everything's fine. No, it's not fine. And somewhere we've got to be comfortable with saying it's not fine and stay there long enough. One of the great struggles I have, Dr. Jackson, Alvin, with the Christian church today is we run past Calvary so fast. But you got to stay there for a while. And this nation better stay here and see what it's doing to people here. So Jennifer E. Cuffey Wilson is coming to testify as an impacted person. Stephanie Helslop is coming to testify as an impacted person. Brenda Temple is coming to testify as an impacted person. Pamela Penotowski is coming to testify. And then Reverend Dr. Liz, our co-chair, will respond to the first testifiers. And then we have 3 more after this. I would ask the testifiers, as best you can, to just be mindful of the clock there in front of us. But like the Gettysburg Address, that wasn't but 2 minutes, but it changed the country. Give your best from your heart.
Akoi, everybody. My name is Jennifer E. Cuffey Wilson, and I'm from the Shinnecock Indian Nation. I'm Shinnecock Montauk, and we live out on Long Island, out in the richest part in this country. The richest part in this country. We are surrounded by nothing but billionaires. And one of the billionaires was Bloomberg. And Bloomberg had the nerve to go on national television and tell them that the Shinnecock Indian Nation, disastrous. They are disastrous. They live terrible. They have nothing but alcoholism, drug addiction, and we have to help these people. Well, are they helping us? No. But he's got a house out there. He's living on stolen land from 1640. The settlers came in one hand, like my sister Becky talks, one hand with a pen, the other hand with rum. And from 1640 until 1859, and then 1859, they stole 3,600 acres and moved us on to a peninsula, a swamp area, because they wanted us to die. They talk about slavery being the #1 in this country. No, it was genocide. Because they're trying to kill our people, and they're still trying to kill our people. And yes, I'm mad. I'm mad as hell.
I don't know if, I'm going to ask you, I don't know if as people testify like this, if a hand clap is what we ought to do, or if we should shout, somebody's hurting our brothers and sisters. It's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Can we try that at the end of every testifier?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Stephanie. I'm a barista at the Meadow Street Starbucks in Ithaca, New York. And as of 3 days ago, I'm a member of Starbucks Workers United. All 3 Ithaca Starbucks stores voted nearly unanimously to join the union last Friday, making us the first city in the country to have 100% of Starbucks stores unionized. But we won't be the last. We're just getting started. I've never been a member of a labor union before. Like most of my coworkers, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. Many of us have second jobs, and it's still barely enough to get by. Meanwhile, the former CEO of Starbucks just got a $60 million golden parachute. It is our labor that has made Starbucks the multi-billion-dollar company it is, and all we are asking for is what we deserve. In return, we have been met with threats, bullying, harassment, and cuts in hours. Highly respected and competent workers have been fired simply for supporting the union. Where's their $60 million? The company is using the massive wealth they have made off our labor to try to prevent us from exercising our fundamental right to unionize, and I find that deeply shameful. But it also gives me hope, because in spite of all the obstacles, we are still winning. Our solidarity is stronger than their ill-gotten wealth. And if we can do it, if Amazon workers on Staten Island can do it, then other workers can too. The union has been our strength, but it goes beyond our fellow Starbucks workers. The broader community has had our backs, and this means so much to us. The Poor People's Campaign has been an incredible ally, particularly in fighting for justice for the fired Memphis 7. I feel so honored to be here tonight on behalf of my union and to be part of this movement. I want to thank Reverend Barber, Reverend Theo Harris, and everyone involved in the Poor People's Campaign for your moral leadership, and I hope to see you all in Washington on June 18th. Thank you so much, and solidarity forever.
Somebody's hurting our people. It's going on. And we won't be silent anymore. Give them a hand as they come.
Good afternoon, everyone. Greetings to all. My name is Brenda Temple. I am thrilled to be here with you today. I am a resident of Oceanside Houses in Far Rockaway, Queens. The Oceanside Houses is one of over 250 public housing developments in New York City, owned and operated by New York City Housing Authority, NYCHA. But I am speaking for all public housing throughout our country. I am an activist and work with the Committee for Independent Community Action under the direction of Dr. Lenora Fulani, who believes in developing grassroots leadership so that ordinary people, poor people, can grow and develop as leaders. I am such a leader. I and the Committee for Independent Community Action are leading a New York City-wide petition campaign to demand Mayor Attic Adams to stop the privatization of public housing and support residents. We residents are poor, and HUD and NYCHA have let the conditions of our homes to over 500,000 New Yorkers decay and rot and poison our people. NYCHA and the City of New York have been implementing a plan to give management of public housing over to private developers who will make money, a lot of money, on our backs. And we say people before profit. Privatization of public housing is public housing, as we know. And that means a mass eviction, an exodus of hardworking poor people who have always been essential to this country, who is the backbone of this country. Who else would clean your parents' and grandparents' bed floors, take care of your children?
That's right.
Clean, cook, security, teachers' aides. I, myself, was a court stenographer, but my teacher at college told me, you can't be that because computers will take over your job. I ended up being a secretary in the medical office, but I'm not mad about it. I am disappointed of the lost opportunities and encouragement. But my community supports me. I love my community. And we ride and die with each other through thick and thin. The Poor People's Campaign is about a third reconstruction. We need decent housing, affordable housing to over 140 million of us Americans who can't afford to live in our own country. This is our fight here in New York. And we demand decent public housing. We demand to manage our homes.
That's
and
right.
we demand democracy.
That's right. Somebody's hurting our people. And it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore.
Hey, my name is Pamela Poniatowski. I'm from Rhode Island. I'm a tri-chair. After working my whole life, I became disabled in 2019. And because I was unaware of the reality facing the 140 million people in this country who are living in poverty while working low-paying jobs, I thought there was a safety net. I reasoned with myself, having necessary surgery and becoming disabled will be okay because we're a compassionate country and we have a social safety net for the least of these in this country. I was not aware that more than 70% of households with disabled members living below the poverty line do not receive federal housing assistance. But I now know because I was waiting for housing for 3 years. And it seems I am one of the lucky ones, only waiting 3 years for housing. There are still millions of people waiting for housing. Just look around, we can see them in every state. It is heartbreaking. And there are 140 million people who are just one emergency away from losing everything. The waiting list for housing anywhere is years long. What are we expected to do during those years? We must change policies and start funding a social safety net in a way that will make a difference. There are many people in every state doing good work to try and provide for those who find themselves homeless, but we need federal policies to change so that those groups can get funding that will support them in the work they do. Spending 52 cents out of every discretionary dollar on militarism and not even spending 1% of our gross national product on the people that make up this country is despicable.
That's it.
One of the basic human rights that we at the Poor People's Campaign are fighting for is housing. In every state, we see homelessness. We are veterans. We are people that do not have a monetary safety net to fall back on, and we are people who are disabled. What does it say about us? Please join us at the march in Washington on June 18th, 2022. I'll see you there.
Somebody's hurting our people. And it's gone on far too long. And we won't be silent anymore. Let's receive Reverend Liz Theo Harris, our co-chair of the campaign.
Massachusetts and Rhode Island and Maine and Vermont, good evening, these United States. This evening, speaking as a Christian preacher, a biblical scholar, a mom of 2 amazing New York City public school kids that are here at this mass meeting, a long-time anti-poverty activist, someone who has experienced poverty firsthand myself. I can think of nowhere more powerful to be than right at the center, the heart of Wall Street, the day after Palm Sunday, the anniversary of that original Moral Monday. Nowhere that freedom fighters should be turning over tables of injustice, disrupting, unsettling our complacent national life. Nowhere that the good news of living wages and health care and clean water and education and voting rights must be declared. Nowhere I would rather cry out, everybody's got a right to live. Somebody's been hurting our people. It's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Being here on our march at this mass meeting reminds me of my favorite Bible passage from Luke, from the story of Palm Sunday. when that mighty mule train of freedom fighters, poor people, and others hurt by empire on their way to the center of political and economic power, on their way to declare no justice, no peace. What do we want? Health care. When do we want it? Now. What do we want? Clean air. When do we want it? Now. And as the story goes, some of the authorities start getting worried. What if this protest is sustained? What if these people continue to raise their voices and build power? They say to Jesus in Luke 19, "Teacher, order your disciples to stop." But he answered, "I tell you, if these were silent, the stones would shout out." Well, I heard some shouting on the streets. And I'm hearing some truth in the sanctuary. The cries, the testimonies that we will not be silent anymore. And we will cry out. On June 18th, the very foundations of this nation will tremble as we build a third Reconstruction. Last week was the anniversary of the crucifixion of Reverend Dr. King, who had a message for this moment. He said, "I believe there is only one dignified, sincere, effective method of working with the poor who exist from day to day in wretched and miserable conditions. You cannot work over them. You cannot work around them. You cannot work for them. You must work with them." And so we, the poor, the low wage, the underinsured, clergy, young, old, queer, straight, we are gathered to demonstrate the power of the poor, banding together, demanding that this country change for the better, to call for a radical redistribution of political and economic power, to build the power to enact all our demands, and to rise together on June 18th. Because if there ever was a time to fight, it is here in New York City. We have mass abandonment amidst mass abundance. We have a mayor demolishing hundreds of homeless encampments. We have school children being sacrificed just so business leaders can have their parents serve them. We have brokers here on Wall Street bidding on food prices as families in this country all over the world can't afford food. But it doesn't have to be this way. So New York, Massachusetts, Vermont, Rhode Island, Maine, these United States, are you ready? Because I'm marching into this sanctuary saying, we are ready. We are ready. We are ready. Here we come.
Come on, come on. Come on, come on. Come on, come on. Give me this mic, Mike. Come on. We are ready. Yeah. For justice. Just the drum, just the drum, just the drum. Just the drum, just the drum. Just the drum. Stop, stop. Good. Warriors, for justice, fight for justice, fight for justice, fight for justice. Here we come, fight for justice. Say it, say it. That's right. Now, Brother Mike, man, I'm going to love on you some. I'm a Pentecostal Southern preacher. You don't never know when I'm going to get up and grab this mic. So you got to be ready. You got to be ready. You got to be ready. Because here we come. Amen. We need to be, listen, y'all, but I want you to do something if we're ready. Look around and see who's not here. Because I don't want us to get fooled by the crowd. I want you to look around because the question is, how many of you are going to make sure at least 5 impacted poor, low-wealth people come with you? See, it's not enough for us to come. We must be true. And so I want you to look again at what power and pain looks like on this video.
We must be honest about the foundations of the political and economic systems we call America. I love America because of her potential, but I know that America will never even get close to being a more perfect nation until we are honest about the politics of rejection.
I want to tell you about some of the leaders who are building the Poor People's Campaign. Callie Greer from Selma, Alabama, who had to bury her daughter, Venus, because she didn't have health care.
I'm here today to share my daughter Venus's story. Venus discovered a small lump in her breast and she wasn't insured. Venus had to be approved for every prescription and every piece of medical equipment that she needed. I'm standing here today in solidarity with the Poor People's Campaign because no one should have to bury their child in America because they don't have health care insurance.
I'm 46 years old. I've lived in poverty here in West Virginia every day of my life. And I'm working. I am a working poor with a bachelor's degree. I'm doing the best I can with what I have.
I'm a second-generation fast food worker, and I've experienced the cycle of poverty firsthand. Growing up, I watched my mother endure long hours of back-breaking labor, doing everything she could to feed me and my sisters. My employer barely pays me enough to pay rent and utilities, let alone the medical expenses with my mother.
I worked 41 years in the coal mines. I have black lung, and it's just unfathomable what these poor coal miners have to go through in order to get what they have worked for and deserve.
I'm a Vietnam veteran. My only chance of going to college was joining the Army.
It was one thing to know that you didn't have water and you couldn't afford your water. It's a whole nother to find out that they shut off your entire community and none of you matter.
But when I lost my housing, health care, and income all at the same time, I was terrified, panicked.
Now, I'm also a Kansas farmer's wife.
Kansas farmers are committing suicide at a far greater rate than the national average.
Hi, my name is Pamela Rush. I'm from Lowndes County, Alabama, and I live in a mobile home with my 2 kids. And I got raw sewage. I don't have no money on power.
This is the largest encampment in Aberdeen. There's about 1,000 people in a town of 16,000 who are homeless.
In my community, we were all shut off for the day because none of us could afford our water bills. In the past, my family wasn't able to afford electricity in the winter. It was very hard on all of us.
But the indigenous people in the surrounding communities that are being affected, we talk about health care. We talk about worrying about the environment, but yet when they're allowing open pit mines and letting it leak into the land, into the water, the high rate of cancer and the high bills of health is going to continue to raise because of corporations and greeds and politicians that don't want to listen.
There's a new chemical company that's producing another carcinogen in our community. It's amazing the people who just started dying of cancer.
This wall, this is sin of the highest order.
I put my life on the line at 17 years old to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And right now what we have domestic enemies right here.
When there are 38 million poor children, when 60% of African Americans are poor, when 65% of Latinx are poor, when 40% of Asians are poor, when there are 67 million poor white people, we must say, this is not right.
Somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore.
Our brothers and sisters are sleeping on the streets. For a country this rich to have so many people poor, it's immoral and it's wrong.
Our backs are against the wall, and we got no choice but to push.
And together we will proclaim liberty throughout the land for the enslaved, for the poor, and for us all.
Followed that breaking news in Albany, where a large group of protesters have moved into the street.
Washington Avenue between City Hall and Lark Street closed down.
Protesters with the Poor People's Campaign of Indiana.
2 o'clock on the East Coast, 2 o'clock in the middle, 2 o'clock on the West Coast. A wave, and the historians tell us it's never happened before.
Our communities, Muslim communities, who have joined the Poor People's Campaign, you can count on us.
Our democracy is in trouble.
Our democracy is in trouble.
And we come to demand.
Second warning.
I cannot stand here and claim to be a follower of Jesus Christ and be silent about the moral outrage that is going on in our country.
Because it's crucial that we make ourselves heard. No one is listening.
We are the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And we are here. We are poor. We are clergy. And we're here to say to our nation's capital and to the highest court of this land that everybody has a right to live. Everybody has a right to learn. Everybody has a right to love. Everybody has a right to living wages. Everybody has a right to vote. Everybody has a right to thrive in this society. Everybody say, oh! I believe that we will win. I believe that we will win. Freedom fighters and taught us how to fight.
The poor and their clergy. We read Article 6 of the Kentucky State Constitution that says we have a right to free assembly.
We are demanding that we stop the war on our poor.
We demand the right to vote. Formally you need to cease and desist immediately or you'll be arrested.
It's
seas. When throughout history, prophets have to arise to sound the alarm.
Together until humanity is respected and children are protected and civil rights and labor rights and human rights are never neglected. I want you to know that when hands that once picked cotton join hands of Latinos, join hands of progressive whites, join faith hands and labor hands and Asian hands and Native American hands and poor hands and wealthy hands with a conscience and gay hands and straight hands and trans hands and Christian hands and Jewish hands and Muslim hands and Hindu hands and Buddhist hands. When we all get together, we are an instrument of redemption. When we join hands, we can revive and make sure that the promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and equal protection under the law is never taken away from anybody. So I got a question. Are the rejected ready to revive and declare that this land is your land, this land is my land, this land is our land, and together from the State House to the White House, the rejected are going to demand that this nation never give up on being one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, y'all. It's time to take out our cell phones. Hold them up in the air. I want you to text this phone number. It's right here on the front of the podium. Online, too, I hope you're taking out your cell phones. Let's text the phone number 38542. And in the message, type the word moral. We're texting to the phone number 38542 and send a text message moral to subscribe and sign up with this campaign. Thanks, y'all.
We've got to make sure that America sees and hears the faces. So Josh Cupula, pronouns they and them, is coming. Then Amy Ty is coming. Valoni Golden are coming to share how they are impacted. And remember, we're talking to tens of thousands of people right now across this country for this broadcast, not just those of us in here. We're helping to mobilize them. We welcome your honesty and your story. Give them a hand as they come.
Hello. My name is Josh Coppola. I'm queer. I'm poor. And I'm also a tri-chair of the Maine Poor People's Campaign.
That's it.
I moved today to speak by both grief and joy. I'm saddened by this distorted moral narrative of Christian nationalism. And I'm grieving for the suffering of those that are still in the closet and those that are suffering from the impacts of exclusion, because this rhetoric can spur violence. And in many states, violent policy. And our siblings are already hurting. I grew up with that shame-mongering by politicians, public figures, and family members. Though I wish those days were past, my heart knows how those ideas divide families and keep poor people from recognizing their shared interest. How much longer do we LGBTQ plus folks have to start over, face homelessness, trauma, addiction, abusive situations with belonging and safety so far out of reach? It ain't right.
That's right.
The truth is, their distorted moral narrative is what's deepening the suffering in this country and making us all less secure. And if division is what they seek, then what we need to do is come together. And that's why I'm moved by joy today. And that's why I'm getting all my people to the Moral March in D.C. and that mass assembly. Because I love myself and my community, it's time to have a meeting. Because somebody's been hurting our families and dividing our families, it's time to have a meeting. See you all and yours in D.C. on June 18th.
Good evening. My name is Amy Ty. I'm a single mom raised by another single mom. I'm a teacher, I'm a counselor, and I'm a friend to all. And I'm an activist. Perhaps most importantly, though, I'm a human being in a society that is on the verge of collapse. A society plagued by oppression and injustice. So many nights I wake up with my heart pounding because I cannot imagine what kind of future my 16-year-old son will have or not have because of climate devastation. Every day I see and feel the toll of systemic racism and injustice on my loved ones, knowing that people out there won't stop at anything just because they don't like the way I look is terrifying. Witnessing and experiencing the injustice and violence committed against us, poor people, Black, brown, and indigenous people every day is both exhausting and gut-wrenching. Our society's collective mental health is a disaster. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had a dream. He united us across time and space to dream of a better world. All my life, I've wished that I could have been in Washington, D.C., standing up for civil rights and equality, standing with Dr. King to demand an end to poverty and greed, hatred, and war. We still have a long road ahead of us to make this dream come true. But I'm here today because I still believe in his dream, and I'm not giving up on it. And this is why I will be in Washington on June 18th, hopefully with all of you around the whole country, to demand that our country's pledge of liberty and justice for all be a true pledge and not a false promise. This is the chance of our lifetime because this is the moment we change history.
Hey, y'all. You hear it? Hey, I'm Volney Gordon. I'm from Vermont, from with the Vermont Workers Center and the Vermont Poor People's Campaign, but I became an expert in poverty right on these very streets. In the shadow of obscene wealth, amidst headquarters and institutions that built their wealth on the backs of our class and then turned right around and waged an all-out war, both chemical and economic, on those very same people. Having experienced everything that poverty had to offer here in New York, I still loved it, and I fought so hard to stay here. Like everything from incarceration to a physical illness that almost took my life. I still love the city. I resorted to sleeping on the streets. I was priced out by the insane hurdles that you have to go through here to access affordable housing, transportation, healthy food without having to travel to the good neighborhood. Thinking there was a geographic solution to poverty, I set out all across the United States, moving from New York to Florida to Connecticut, now to Vermont, and there is none. What I found was the cruel manipulation of the poor taking the very same face all over our country. Literal famine and slavery are alive and well, y'all, in the richest country in the world. If it wasn't just us in the Bronx being pressed, Black and brown people in the Bronx, if white people are struggling just as hard in other places, then that meant it just wasn't me. That means something was systemic. That means something had to change. We had to get together. The ruling class doesn't want us to strategize across lines of division, because our strength, the strength of our class, of working people, is what powers this machine. The people of Vermont, just like the people of New York, just like the people of Massachusetts and Rhode Island and Carolina and Venezuela, all of our demands are the same. We demand healthy food, we demand housing, we demand quality health care. We're tired of the yo-yos, the switcheroos, every kind of game that they've been playing on us, all those okey dokes. I'm mobilizing with my people in Vermont. We're coming out to Washington on June 18th to tell people we're done. We'll have none of it. Yeah. We demand a moral revival. We're only strong when we're in step, folks. We got to get it together. I want to see y'all in Washington on June 18th. Forward together. Bless.
Gracious God, your help and your strength we ask for. I was talking with someone the other day, and they said they had a problem with our movement. And the problem was, they said, you all share too many sad facts. They said you need to have a dream like Dr. King. And I said, did you listen to the first 17 minutes of the speech? When he talked about being tired of having a check bounce and written on it insufficient funds. And then I asked him, well, what do you do with all of this? What do you do with all of this, these testimonies? Do you ignore my queer brother from Maine? Do you ignore my sister, my Native American sister, Native sister, not Native American? Do you ignore a mother who's afraid for her black child, though she's white, that one day he won't be threatened because of his skin color? What do you do with it? What do you do with 45% of New Yorkers living in poverty, if you know that? 58% of children, 2.4 million. What do you do with 8.6 million people living in poverty and low wealth in New York? Yes, Wall Street is here, but broken down people are here too. What do you do with million people or more without health care? You just ignore it. What do you do with a person working a minimum wage job having to work 109 hours a week in New York just to afford a two-bedroom apartment? And there's not a county in this country that claims to be the wealthiest country in the where a person can work a minimum wage job and afford a basic two-bedroom apartment and can afford to eat meat or to eat decent 3 times a week. And yet we have a $21 trillion gross domestic product. What do you do with that? What do you do with a state where there's 5.4 million poor and low-income voters in this state, and And too often they're ignored, and only about 3 million vote because they've just given up on the system. What do you do if you know that in Vermont, there's 35% of Vermont? We don't even talk about Vermont most of the time when it comes to poverty, but 35% of Vermont is poor and low wealth. 44% of the children, 59% of black people, 50% of Latinos, 36% of all white people, 210,000 plus people. What do you do with 24,000 folk in Vermont without health care? And in Vermont, you have to work 80 hours a week, the minimum wage job, just to afford a basic 2-bedroom apartment. What do? Just ignore it? Because somebody says you all bring up too many sad facts? What do you do when, and you know that in Maine, 34% of Mainers are poor and low income, 450,000 people, 120,000 children, 280,000 women, 39% of white people, 467,000 white people are poor and low wealth in Maine. What do you do with that, especially since we live in a country that often wants to make poverty just a black issue or a brown issue? What do you do when you know that in Maine, you've got to work 70 hours a week to afford a basic 2-bedroom apartment? What about Massachusetts, where there are 36% of people are poor and low wealth? 2.4 million people. The state where they claim to have some of the great institutions like Harvard and MIT, and yet 47% of children are poor and low wealth. 43% of women, 1.4 million black people, 1.6 million white people. What do you do? Rhode Island, 36% of Rhode Islanders are poor and low wealth, 360,000 people. And in Rhode Island, you've got to work 7 to 8 hours a week at minimum wage just to afford a basic 2-bedroom apartment. And waitresses and waiters have to work more because they don't make but $2.13 an hour, even today. And what do you do when you find out, because you do a study to look at how poverty and the pandemic connected? And you do a study hoping you're not going to find out what you have heard in various stories from people. And then the study comes back and it tells you that in America, the systems allowed the pandemic to feed on the poor. And poor people died at a rate of 2 to 5 times more than other folk. And it's not due to not getting vaccinations. That the pandemic didn't discriminate, but we did. What do you do when you find out that 60% of the folk that died didn't have to die? If we had tracked how poverty would and what people didn't have before COVID, and if we had said in the midst of COVID, we're going to at least guarantee health care and guarantee services, but instead we took people who were service workers and renamed them essential workers, but then treated them like expendable. Now, what do you do with that? Well, I tell you, I'm tired. I'm tired tonight. I'm tired. I'm physically tired. We just came back from West Virginia. I'm physically tired because I'm in the midst of an ankylosing spondylitis arthritic flare that kicked in a month ago that has heated up all the joints in my body. But that ain't what I'm most tired of. I'll deal with that with God's help. I'm tired of this country saying that ain't nothing we can do. Because over 2,600 years ago, the prophet Amos actually told us what to do when you're in a situation like this. Yeah. A text honored by Muslims and Christians and Jews, and even people are not people of faith, but they gleaned the wisdom from this text. It says in Amos chapter 5 to the nation, you might hate this kind of truth, but I'm going to tell it. It's raw, and it's not popular. You run roughshod over the poor. You take bread out of their mouths. You take bribes on the left and the right. And some people have thrown up their hands and said that justice is a lost cause. But I need some people that will seek good and not evil. I need some folk that will work it out in the public square. And then verse 16 of Amos chapter 5, it says, God says, I need a group of people that will go in the streets and cry as loud as you can. I need a group of people that will fill up the malls and fill up the shops and weep loudly and declare, not us, not on our watch. Empty every office, stores, factories, workplace. I need some folk that will act like something's wrong. God says, I want to hear it, and then if I can hear you crying, I'll give you some extra help. And then Amos says that God says, I'm sick of your religious meetings. I'm sick of your conventions. I'm sick of your political meetings. I'm sick of your fundraising schemes. You know what I want? I want justice to roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. My brothers and sisters, we've got a chance here. While the nation is hurting, to help break the heart all the way open so the nation can recognize that not only do we need to shock the heart, we need a heart transplant in America. Something wrong with us when you can go through a pandemic and you don't even make sure folk have health care. Liz, the MIT professor Otto Schwammer says there's a blind spot in American economic theory today. It's called consciousness. Our refusal to recognize that we are all integrated, that we really do need each other, that Wall Street can't keep other folk in the ditch unless Wall Street stays in the ditch with them. Another scholar in a book called America Beyond Capitalism said that what we are seeing is the process of slow decay, punctuated by a recurring economic crisis. And what's going to happen is you'll move and then it'll drop and it'll move and it'll fall out because we've got these trends of inequality, economic dislocation, failing democratic accountability, deepening poverty, ecological degradation. And what's happening is people slowly and quietly are beginning to lose any hope in the capabilities and the moral integrity of the system. Somebody's got to step up and try to save this country from itself. And that's where you and I come in. That's where you and I come in. That's why you and I are alive. We've been called to say to this nation, you can't live in isolation. You can't let things happen to other folk and think that it's not going to eventually happen to everybody. Somebody's got to seek good and not evil. Somebody's got to say everybody has a right to live. Somebody's got to tell the truth. Somebody has to say there are consequences This nation's foundations cannot handle the weight of almost half of its people living in poverty and low wealth much longer. You think January 6th was something when a bunch of middle class and upper middle class folk led by white supremacy did what they did? I don't want to see what happens when poor and low wealth people lose hope. It is from that place of despair that Hitlers and autocrats and demagogues grow out of. What we're doing here, brothers and sisters, is more than just having a nice day to curse. We're really on a mission of salvation. We're on a mission of love. We're on a mission of truth-telling. We're trying to say to America, save yourself. It doesn't have to go down like this. That's why we've got to gather. Because somebody's got to tell the consequences. If everybody doesn't have health care, the systems are going to fall apart. If you keep child poverty alive, it costs us $1 trillion a year to keep children poor. If you keep blocking living wages, you are blocking billions of dollars going into the economy. If you keep, Dr. King said, any nation that spends more money on its military and its military determines all of its decisions is on a spiral towards death. And that's why finally, Amos says, in order to face this, there's got to be a gathering. But it's interesting what Amos says. He says in this text, he says, I don't need everybody. Let me make that to you. I don't need everybody. I'm always struck by this text, Liz. It says, if I can just find a remnant. I don't need everybody. If I can find some folk from Massachusetts and find some people from Vermont and find some people from New York and if I can find some gay folk and some straight folk, if I can find some black folk and some white folk and some native folk and some Latino folk and some Asian folk, I don't need everybody. But I can find some Catholic folk and some Christian folk and some Muslim people and some Jewish folk. If I can find some folk that don't even necessarily have a faith, but they believe in the moral arc of the universe, if I can find some folk. And if those folk will go in the street and have a meeting. Where's my brother from Maine? Where's my brother from Maine? Since you started this, come on up here and stand beside me. If I can find some folk that'll have a meeting in the public square and put a face on the problem. God says we need to have a meeting. There's work to be done. Nation claims to be one nation under God. Well, we need to have a meeting until we have living wages, till we have an adequate income, till we have health care, until we have affordable housing, till we have quality public education, till we have expanded voting rights. We need a meeting. But we got to get outside of the church. We got to get outside of the union hall. We got to get in the street. We got to have a meeting where everybody that cares knows how to cry and knows how to shout, knows how to say something is wrong, and we can correct the lie of scarcity. Touch your neighbor, say, scarcity is a lie. It's a damn lie. Ain't nothing scarce in this world. God made enough for everybody. And then there's another lie, the lie that we don't know what to do. I'm from the country, and I know what to do. I know how you get a pig, make a pig a hog. All you got to do is feed it. You want to make poor people better, feed them, let them get a living wage. You want folk without houses to have something, give them a house, give them housing. It ain't that deep. We know what to do. And then we got to have moral conscience. There must be a meeting. You know, I thought I was wrong, and then I looked in the scripture. And y'all, I found out. Can I preach just a little bit? I'm tired, but can I preach a little bit? My tail. I read the scriptures and found out that when God created the earth in our tradition, God didn't do it alone. He had a meeting. He said, let us make the world. Huh? When Pharaoh thought he had all the power, they tell me some folk had a meeting down by the Red Sea. And the last time I heard, Pharaoh had drowned in the sea. They tell me that Ezekiel had a meeting down in a valley of dry bones. And the bones came together and became a mighty army. They tell me that Daniel and them had a meeting in the fiery furnace. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were all at the meeting. Then they tell me Jesus had a meeting when he fed the 5,000. Then he had a meeting on Calvary where the people began to get up that had been dead. Then there was a meeting at Pentecost. They tell me the abolitionists had a meeting. That's how they overcame slavery. They tell me Sojourner Truth and women's rights folk had a meeting. They tell me that down in Montgomery, Alabama, they had a meeting. They tell me in Selma, they had a meeting. They tell me in Birmingham, they had a meeting. They tell me in 1963 on the mall in D.C., they had a meeting. Everywhere change has ever come, the rejected came together and had a meeting. You ready for a meeting? Are you ready for a meeting? Are you ready? Children need to be saved. Are you ready? Sick folk need to be healed. Are you ready? Workers need to be paid. Are you ready? The environment needs to be saved. Are you ready? Voting rights must be protected. Are you ready? Your neighbors and won't you come to the meeting? June 18th, Washington, D.C.
Don't have but one question. Are y'all ready for a meeting? Are you ready for a meeting? When? When? Where? Washington, D.C. I want you to take your pledge cards out. We're nearing the end of our time. This has been a great meeting tonight, but we're getting ready for a great meeting in Washington, D.C. on June 18th, and we look forward to seeing all of you there. You know, it's wonderful to be back home in New York City, and that's really saying something for a boy from the Mississippi Delta, but this is home too, and it's good to be back home. Two of the great moral voices of our day, the most consequential moral voices of our day, Bishop William J. Barber II and the Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris. We thank God for them and for their leadership. We thank God for all of you and the Poor People's Campaign. I want you to take out your cards, and I want everybody. Clinton reminded us at the very beginning that the reason we have come tonight is to mobilize and be ready for June 18th. And so it's about all of us signing up. Everybody here tonight ought to sign up And it's about you thinking about reaching out to your neighbors, your friends, your associates, and inviting them to sign up and helping others get to Washington, D.C. on June 18th. I'm going to ask us in a few moments, I don't know whether there's something else before we get, there is something else. There's some clergy here to tell about why they are coming and to talk about their mobilization. So as you're getting your cards ready, we're going to call on you to bring them up in just a moment. But I want the local clergy who are here to come and announce your mobilization goals for June 18th. Let's welcome them as they come. Clergy from New York City.
Hello all, my name is Jonathan Spear. I'm a proud member of Congregation Beth Elohim in Brooklyn. Along with my rabbis and pastors at neighboring churches, we are mobilizing for June 18th. We know we are trying to build a beloved community. We need to close the gap between where we are and where we see ourselves, what we want the world to be. We are mobilizing buses for June 18th.
Hey everybody, I'm Reverend Lee Matthews from St. Paul and St. Andrew United Methodist. The Methodists are in the house, along with Reverend Dor Lamar LeBron on the back pew. We are organizing for New York Annual Conference to get Methodist action moving towards DC on June 18th. And we want to participate and be a witness to the collective power of the people. It's our greatest gift, our greatest asset. We want to use it. We'll be there because you all will be there. We can do it together. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Richard X. III from the Riverside Church, New York City. And we are mobilizing on June 18th because we believe the words of the poor prophet, as you have done to the least of these, you have also done to me. See you in D.C.
My name is Tim Wiseman, and I am the pastor at Holy Trinity Lutheran Church here on the Upper West Side, and we are mobilizing for June 18th in Washington, D.C., and we are going to get the Lutherans to come with us.
All right, the Lutherans.
Hi, my name is Becky Craxel. I'm substituting for my minister, Michael Boosie. We're here from Judson Church because we believe in the demands, and we're going to be in Washington on June 18th.
June 18th. Bring it home, Beth.
I'm Pastor Beth. I'm from Syracuse, New York. And my congregation actually closed, but that doesn't stop me because, as Pastor Liz would say, Presbyterians believe in connections. And so in upstate New York, we're coming from Buffalo to Rochester, all the way across Route 90 to Albany, up and down 81, from Watertown down to Binghamton. We're coming, and I hope you join us.
All right. All right, we're coming and we're going to keep on coming. We are coming and we're going to keep on coming until justice rolls down like waters, like an ocean, like an ever-flowing stream, until everybody is in and nobody is out. I want you to take out your pledge card, fill it out, and the musicians are going to lead us. And I want you to come. There's a basket down here. There are baskets at the door as you leave. Musicians lead us. Are y'all ready for a meeting? Are y'all ready for a meeting? All right, let's get ready for the meeting. Bring your card. Maybe you want to bring some money even to help others get there. That's right. I'll take your card right here. Thank you. Thank you. Come on, let's stand. And as we sing, And as we bring our pledges forward about getting everybody out to Washington, D.C., June 18th, we leave here in a few weeks and we go to Philadelphia, and then we go to Los Angeles, and then we go to Memphis, Tennessee, and the Mississippi Delta, and then to the meeting in Washington, D.C. Come on, band, lead us.
There's a meeting down in Washington. I belong. I belong. There's a meeting down in Washington. I belong. I belong at the meeting. There's a movement down in Washington. I belong. Oh, I belong. Moving down in Washington, I belong, I belong to me. We're changing hearts, we are changing hearts. I belong, I belong. We are changing hearts. I belong, I belong at the meeting. Whoa! There's a meeting down in Washington. It's a meeting down in Washington. I belong. Come on. There's a meeting down in Washington. I belong. Oh, I belong. I belong. There's a meeting down in Washington. I belong. I belong. We're taking heart. We are changing hearts. I belong. I belong. I belong. We are changing hearts. I belong. I belong at the. One more time, come on. There's a meeting down in Washington. I belong. Oh, I belong. I belong. Meeting down in Washington. I belong. I belong. Come on. We are built. I belong. Oh, I belong. I belong. We are building power. I belong. I belong to me. Let's say it again. We are building power. Come on. I belong. I belong. We are building power. I belong. I belong at the meeting. There's a meeting down in Washington. I belong. Oh, I belong. I belong. There's a meeting down in Washington. I belong.